we must have deeper economic relations. We feel after we know the road we need to follow to grow our economy.
There is absolute economic collapse.
On this, the free talk. Zimbabwe goes to election in 2023, and since the last election that had a disputed result which ended in the Concord, there was a commitment, a political commitment, that the next elections should have results that are acceptable across the board. And for that, dialogue was set and Pollard was put into motion. One of its roles and responsibilities was to ensure that there's a free and fair environment for election. And in its infancy, we also had a conversation with Professor Madhuku, who's part of the Pollard, and he told us his thinking and what should be achieved by Pollard. Now, just a year before we go into election, we are sitting down again with Professor Madhuku, and we're discussing what has Pollard achieved, and will the 2023 general elections give Zimbabweans any respite? This on here, the free talk with me, your host, Dara. We are in conversation with Professor Madhuku. Thank you very much, Professor Madhuku, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to be on the platform.
Yes. Now, I just want us to just jump in and say, what is your view? Are there any benefits that Pollard has so far brought just less than a year before we get into another election?
Okay, yes, I must confidently say that Pollard has brought benefits. And the way I should put it across is related to your initial introduction, whether in fact the 2023 elections will be free and fair, or whether or not the 2023 elections will be in a better environment than the environment we had in 2018. Whether in the 2023 Zimbabweans would have a much better opportunity to express themselves and to determine the government of their choice. The answer to all those questions is yes. We will have a very free and fair election in 2023. We will have a much better political environment in 2023 than we've ever had before. And this is what I can guarantee from what we have been doing in Poland. And having said that, I'm very much alive to the fact that whether or not the environment is free or fair depends on a number of people. I mean, it's like beauty, it is in the eyes of someone else. There are people who always tell you that the environment is not conducive, that in fact the elections will never be free and fair. They can tell you now that the election 2023 will not be free and fair. We're not yet even there. But I'll tell you myself that they will be free and fair. If there's a Zimbabwean out there who wants a president of their choice, who wants a member of parliament of their choice, a local council of their choice, they must be very confident that they will be able to do that. They must do that. They must do that. And they will succeed.
But how do you, what has changed really from what we had in 2018 and right now that makes you have this belief?
I mean, there's a thinking that we must have an environment where politicians of different persuasions are able to interact and exchange. The only thing that has not happened in Poland is that some political parties chose not to be part of Poland. But for people like us who have been in Poland, we are not necessarily in agreement with everything that is happening in the country. But we can confidently influence that certain things happen. And so some of the things that are going to happen is that before, I think the end of October or so, we will have an amendment to the Electoral Act, which will bring in a number of things that people have been wanting to have reformed. But there are also things that we failed to achieve through the Poland process. And those things won't be there. But for me, even in the absence of those things, I still believe that Zimbabweans can choose a government of their choice in 2023.
At the center of disputes in Zimbabwe has been the composition of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, which has been viewed as having lacking independence. Now, do you think that this will change in 2023?
I should start by saying I think I had an interview with you when we were burying President Robert Mugabe in Zimba. And you carried a story, I think it is in the Newsday, where I had indicated that we were not going to expect that the current ZEC then would run the elections in 2023. I was then very confident that we were going to have a more transparent process in the appointment of ZEC. That point was raised within Poland. What we failed to achieve there was to have an appointment process different from the current one, because the argument that succeeded, and which we couldn't fight against, was that we would have to go by what the Constitution says. So our problem as we go to 2023 is not so much what the president decided to do, which persons he appointed to ZEC. It is the constitutional provisions. So as Poland, we to agree that the appointment of the ZEC commissioners, in fact, 8 of them, first 2 who were appointed, that includes Mangwana, who is the spokesperson of ZEC, they were appointed, the 2 of them. And then the other 6 who were appointed recently to constitute the 8, outside the chairperson, Justice Chigumba, who still have to be, that post would have to be filled towards the beginning of the year, I think when her term comes to an end, etc. We couldn't succeed in having the amendment or to the Constitution, because what the Constitution says, and Zimbabweans must always be clear as to who to blame and what to blame, not just to blame everything around the corner. It is our Constitution that says that to have a ZEC commissioner, there must be a public process which involves members of parliament, and that the members of parliament, through their committee of parliament, that is the parliamentary committee, that is the standing orders committee of parliament, the one that is responsible for standing orders, is the one that does that, the main committee of parliament. Then it recommends names to the president. It must give the president not less than 12 names, for whatever, if it is 8. And then that process must be open. You interview, you shortlist before the interview, the public must watch the interview process, then you give the names to the president. All what the president is given is the power to pick names from a list. So if a person's name is sent to the president by parliament, then the president, under our constitution, is given the absolute freedom to pick whoever he wants from that list. If you don't want anyone appointed, don't send them to the president. So what we had with, I'm sure that's, I'm anticipating your next question. What we had is a situation where parliament met, and with the parliamentarians who were meeting, there were members from the ZANU-PF, there were members from the MDC, led by my friend Douglas Monzora, members from the CCC, led by my student Chamisa. And what do they have? Those three political parties actually send names to the president, which included the persons that the president finally appointed. So the problem is not with the president. The problem is with parliament. And if you have any problem, because what I'm trying to indicate to you is that as long as what the appointment process went through the constitutional process, I think there's no basis for thinking that because a particular person is of a particular age, or a particular person comes from a particular family, or a particular person is of a given ethnic background, then necessarily those people will not be independent. That kind of reasoning has no place in a democratic society.
You are a lawyer. Wouldn't it be good grounds to recuse you if you were sitting on the bench as a judge, you presiding over a case of your own child? Wouldn't it make sense to ask you to be recused?
Well, I've heard that. I think that it would make sense for anyone who is conflicted not to be involved in a process. But remember that you shouldn't take the blame away from the parliamentary process.
We are not apportioning blame here. We are talking about public perception. We're not being too legalistic. What would I, as an ordinary Zimbabwean, think? Even if ZEC conducts itself professionally in that manner? That's the question.
I think I would prefer to answer it by saying that the question to be posed is, why did Parliament allow a situation where some of its conflicted members participated in a process? It's not about the person that participated, it is the institution that allowed that to happen. And I think you can go on, but the point I want to make out of this interaction we had in this media, Zimbabweans must somewhat identify an appropriate place to make their blames. I have followed the debate around that issue, and I believe it is wrong not to focus on an institution called Parliament, which is supposed to be the real outside with the three organs of state. Parliament is the institution that represents all the people. So if they go through processes and then at the end of that process people choose not to approach Parliament and apportion an appropriate attack on Parliament, then they go to individuals. I think that would be not a very good way of doing it, although there will be a basis for also challenging the individuals.
You stated that the three political parties that participated, but facts indicate that there were only two, not three. In the CCC is not represented in the Standing Orders Committee.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry about that. I thought that the representation there reflected the composition of Parliament. So I would easily withdraw that. I have not read the entire thing. My assumption was that all the three political parties in Parliament would have one or two, because the CCC has something close to about 19. But I don't think it matters, because a number of the members of Parliament who belong to the MDC led by Mwanzora are members of CCC. So it would be very artificial to say that some of those members that have not just been recalled belong to the MDC. I mean, you know it yourself. I mean, Job Scala, the one he's a CCC member, but he's in Parliament on the basis of being, he said in Parliament is Mwanzora's thing. You have all, I mean, I think I can get all those people. So I still would blame all the three political parties because they are in Parliament. Those who are not in the committee ought to have raised noise in the Parliament. So we didn't hear them saying that.
Mm-hmm. But in your view, does this do any good for the electoral processes in Zimbabwe to point that a daughter of one of the most powerful persons in ZANU-PF will now preside over ZEC? Does it give it credibility?
It depends on who is looking at it. For me, it shouldn't matter, because all citizens are equal before the law. They are entitled to all the benefits that are granted. The idea that someone who is, I'm not just thinking of someone who is above 18, but if you look at Mohadi's daughter and you look at her age, to start a process where you want to judge that person on the basis of the family that he comes from, who his father is, and so forth, is, in my view, not just unfair, but it's undemocratic. We cannot have a situation where people are judged on the basis of their ethnicity, on the basis of their family, on the basis of their marital status. She is entitled. People must look at her in her own right. We will see what ZEC will be doing. Remember, ZEC does not vote. And that
So if it doesn't really matter, why has ZEC been a source of contention? I mean, really, why have we been worried about ZEC's independence? Because as you're saying, it doesn't matter.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. The independence of ZEC matters. ZEC must be independent. What doesn't matter is that there is a daughter of a leading politician in ZEC. And I'm saying that family members of politicians must be judged in their own right as individual Zimbabweans.
Is that even possible, Professor? You said it would make sense for you to be recused if you were going to be a judge over your own son. We are asking a daughter to be a judge over her own father because her father is still an active political player. And she's going to sit there and say, my father has lost. And it's okay with you?
No, you're totally missing the point. Totally missing the point. When a person is a member of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, they are there to ensure that the election is conducted in accordance with the law, in accordance with the Constitution, and that there is fair play. And when they do that, everyone will be watching that. It shouldn't be related to who is the contestant there. Because in this matter, we actually do not know whether Mohadi would be a candidate. We know that he's a leader in ZANU-PF. And that should not be the basis to determine whether or not she would be. I know that she will be part of a group of other 8 people, 9 people, including the chairperson. It's very simplistic, and I say so with respect, to believe that a single individual who is supposed to conduct the affairs of this institution in a broad daylight would use that. What it might simply mean is that if she is unprofessional, perhaps her father might know certain information, that's what's happening. I'm not sure, but I don't think the debate must revolve around this relative or this family member of the politicians. I think the debate must involve around the bigger issues. Do we have access to the media during the campaign period? And if ZEC is asked to monitor access to the media, it must come out and say we have no access to the media. Are we able to campaign freely? ZEC must ensure that that happens. Are the nomination processes taking place? Look, I should just beg to differ and say that in the Zimbabwe that I want to live in, it should not matter. And I want to emphasize that. It should not matter your family status.
But wouldn't, more questions have been raised even given the performance in the interview process. She couldn't even answer issues around the Electoral Act. And she wants to be part of running an election.
Yeah, I've followed that. I'm quite surprised that Zimbabweans want to be able to grade people and say that that answer is correct, that was not correct, and so on. And most of these people who are participating, that they have never graded anything, they've never assessed anyone, and to sit there, because I actually saw, I think it's Hopewell who was putting on Twitter these things, and he was suggesting that the answers were wrong. Who says that those answers were wrong?
Is that not the reason why it's supposed to be put before the public, so that the public can formulate its own opinion? And it did formulate its own opinion, didn't it?
Well, I think it is put before the public, not for the public to be technical experts. It is put before the public so that the public are able to assess the integrity of the individuals, that the public can read. But if someone says, like some of the questions asked by the speaker were really meaningless. I mean, there was one long question. I followed that interview. The speaker was asking a question, I don't think he would have answered it himself, which went into what extent, and then what, some meaningless question. And then you ask, you expect people who are coming in to answer. And then the public says they failed, and so on. So it's not an examination. Those people who would have got all the answers correct would not necessarily qualify. It's about whether a person has the broad understanding of what ZEC is all about. And I followed the interview. She had a very clear understanding of what ZEC does and what it's supposed to do. You might not even have the flowing or eloquent language to do it. But we as a public must say, does that person understand what they are supposed to be doing? Do they appear to us to have the integrity to do that? And what experience do they have running and so on? I think most Zimbabweans who are of any age of anything above 25, 26 years and so on, they should be able to stand there and so on. I think lest we may not be understood because you are going on and on over that one issue. I must make it very clear. My theme in this interview is to say that Zimbabweans must get away from these very narrow-minded approaches to our national discourse and getting on who comes from which family, who comes from which region. And I have also seen others assessing that and saying, okay, how many Karangas are there? No, this one comes from Berengwa, this one comes from and so on and so on. That kind of debate. And what is that? But the debate must focus on the institutions. What has Parliament done? Why are Zimbabweans not amending this constitution, which gives the president the power to appoint commissioners? We have made it very clear. I've been clear myself from day one that we have an undemocratic constitution. There's no debate around those issues. In fact, most of the politicians who are busy attacking what happened, when you ask them, do we have a good, we did, we have a very good constitution, we were in parliament in 2013, this is our constitution and so on. If you talk to Monsora, you say, I wrote the constitution. You go to Mangwana and say, we wrote the constitution. This nonsensical document that gives the president such kind of power, you give him not less than 12. You can't, you have to give him. And the limit is not, there's no upward limit. So you can give the president 30 names and he picks number 29, number 30. This constitution is allowing that to happen. And Zimbabweans are not focusing. So I think, Blessed, if you want to be useful, I think with your media, the debate in this country must continue to focus on the big issues. If you have a constitution that says the president shall do what he likes with the names we have given him, that's what the constitution says precisely. And then the constitution does, the president does what he likes. Then you go on top of the mountain and complaining. I think that is a bit unfair. Because you remove President Mnangagwa there, you put someone there who, without changing the constitution. You will hear, they will appoint their wives there, and things like that, and so on. Then today is Mohadi's daughter, the next day is someone else's wife, the next day is, things like that. I think let's focus on the constitutional framework and change it.
Mm-hmm. But the other things that you would have seen, moving on to other things that you've seen that would make our elections in 2023 better, what are they? Because we have seen an upsurge of violence already, and also probably a number of arrests of political leaders and activists. Does this prepare us for a better 2023 general election?
Well, I should say that there are so many other things. There is a general environment where we would not go back to a situation where people are just being beaten for supporting a given political party. You need to give me an example of a situation where you still have war veterans going around beating people, burning people's homes, stopping you from reading a newspaper of your choice, not allowing you to air the thing, and so on. There's quite, that environment is not what we would want much better, but there is an improved environment. You can talk about community radio stations or whatever. There's an improvement that we have. The social media environment, of course, during one of the periods, I think it was under the minister who was fired. He wanted to close all social media at some point, and so on. We're not going to go back to that. So there has been that improvement. And I want to quickly comment on your issue relating to what you are calling upsurge of violence. I think that's an exaggeration of upsurge of violence, because let's pick the incident that is most recent. We have someone who disappears. That is more Blessing Ali. That person has disappeared. Then we get a political party without making any investigation saying this person who has disappeared has been killed by ZANU-PF. You are aware of that. That's a political group that says that. Then the person is finally found. Of course, some ZANU-PF related person who is a murderer or alleged murderer is actually eventually arrested. The person is still in custody as I speak. Then what happens? We get people from one political party going after another political party. That is in what happened in Miami. At least that's what I followed. You can correct me, you know, but what would have happened. So there is this, what I can call violence, because the political party that was blaming ZANU-PF went out of its way to, burn some homes of ZANU-PF people. I think there's a video of someone who is actually, I don't know whether you saw it, where someone is actually destroying a vehicle that is somewhere parked, using whatever sort of machinery. That's violence. That kind of violence cannot be said to be state-sponsored violence, because we all see where it is coming from. These are the two political parties that are fighting, and that violence comes in. Then, of course, the state believes that one or two MPs were responsible for inciting people. They arrest those persons. And then, of course, I think due process must always happen. I'm not sure what has been happening where they are not getting bail, but it's a legal process. You go to court, you are denied bail, they appeal to the High Court denied them bail. Then I'm sure they'll go back to the lower court. If you go by your implication, you are saying when a court denies bail, it is ZANU-PF denying bail. I'm sure that can be. When you go to the High Court and you actually meet a High Court judge, we know, I think it was Justice Mthuli who refused the appeal, didn't allow the appeal. If you choose, you can say she is the ZANU-PF. The next day, these people go before Justice Mthuli with another matter. They win it, they celebrate, and so on. So this is why we have more political parties than these two. I mean, the problem with Zimbabweans is that there are those who think that the bigger political parties, I mean, they are only big for now. But they are the ones who will tell you today that there is violence but they also promote or propagate violence. And that is what is happening. Actually, our party is participating in a by-election in Ward 16 in Chipinge. I think the election will be taking place on the 23rd of July. We had some posters there. And the persons that were moving throughout the night, destroying the posters of the NCA were the CCC members. So if you want me to say who has violence, I think the big political parties have, but there's a big improvement. If we are all responsible and we don't encourage our members to participate in violent activities, all sides, not just one side, we'll have a better election in 2023.
You say with certainty that the CCC were the ones who brought down your posters. Is there evidence?
There is evidence. I mean, I know that. I mean, that's what they've been doing. We're on the ground. We know. I mean, we know the persons and so on. We simply decided as NCA that we won't report them to the police. We had to replace our posters. Look, if you go in a local ward, it's known these are the blessed. I'm sure you will be CCC yourself, and then there's someone else who is another member, and then these things happen. We know these people in Ward 16 in Chipinge, and so on. We live with them, we know them.
So would it be by same token if I was going to say that those who concluded that Mo Blessing Ali had been taken and beaten up by ZANU-PF knew, because they're also in a small community, so they certainly knew?
But they cannot use that as a basis for action. If you believe that Mo Blessing Ali was killed by some persons, you report to the police, and then you put pressure on the law enforcement agents. That question of yours, if it's taken to its logical conclusion, will take us back, I'm sure, to 400 or 500 years ago, where you would say, look, I'll take the law into my own hands. I have seen you doing A, B, C, D. Then I'm going to do either individual justice or what is sometimes called mob justice. Why did we arrest those young people that would then just take the law into their own hands, beat up someone who would have stolen, and so on? We say, no, you don't take the law into your own hands. That's why we have what is called the rule of law. So anyone who has evidence that this is what happened, first, it's irresponsible for a political leader to come out in the open and start telling the world that you believe that so-and-so was murdered by so-and-so. There's no scope for that. If something like that has happened, you must go to a police, and then you would say, look, we are not happy with the progress of the investigation relating to this matter. Because ZANU-PF is not a human being. So it will never be taken to a trial for murder. No, be charged with murder. No, they will never. You will have to go to the individual who did it. So it's again irresponsible to accuse an institution of a crime. You must go to it won't help us. I mean, you tell us that, okay, it's ZANU-PF. Then who in ZANU-PF is the murderer? In fact, that kind of intervention might actually take us away from the murderers. Because that's what was already beginning to happen. If that person had not been arrested, the one who then was arrested, the way these CCC leaders were going about the More Blessing Ali issue was actually threatening the administration of justice, in the sense that they were diverting the attention of the country to what ought to have been investigated. Who is the killer? That's what should happen.
But let us look at the issues that have been raised, the manner in which the law is applied, selective application of justice. You have, for instance, just yesterday, a video of a guy who was telling people that when we say Pasina Chamisa, we mean that they should die. And it's all over social media and nothing happens around it. Do you think that promotes the rule of law, that kind of selective application of justice?
Well, I think that would not be a promotion of the law, and that people who do that ought to be arrested. I'm not sure whether a police report has been given. If you have a video, you have someone there, you must then seek to get such persons arrested. If they are not arrested, you must seek to have what is called a private prosecution. That's what our law provides for that. And so there is room within the rule of law to pursue it. But what I know is that some of these people don't want to pursue that. They would just want the political mileage that comes from.
But is it the political parties that must seek to pursue, or it is the police that are set by the Constitution to do that they must effectively investigate and deal with these issues?
But there must be a complainant. There must be a complainant. You cannot just start investigating things out. I mean, the legal system is very clear. Everyone knows it. There must be a complainant. If your son is killed, and then you don't tell us that that's what has happened, you decide to quietly go and bury your son and so on, even when the community knows that there might have been something, there won't be any. The legal process is initiated by a complainant. So in the case that you have indicated, there must be proper complainants. They should take the matter to the police, write their police complaint.
Even if it's in the eyes of the public, the offense has been committed and we can all see that you've killed someone, and there's no complainant, you can just go scot-free? Is that what you say?
I should say that and repeat it. Except for murder, all right, there must be a complainant. Except for that crime of murder, there must be a complainant. Now, you keep coming to the university for these kind of interviews, and it's useful you do that. So from here, I'm going to the first year students at 2. We'll emphasize that point again. For criminal prosecution, for criminal conduct, except for that crime of murder, perhaps sometimes with treason, but that is a different matter, you have to have a complainant. So even when you see that you are being robbed, blessed, and then you say nothing about it, the police will not just start investigating that someone robbed you, because the way the criminal justice system operates is that the state must prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. So to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, there must be someone giving evidence. So what does it help to then pursue it if you're not going to have a witness who will say, look, I am harmed by this or whatever? There must be such a process. So let's have the public out there clear that if you feel that you have been harmed by some criminal conduct, take the matter up to the police. You have seen what the South Africans do. If I may just borrow an example from there. There always someone who turns up. You also saw that someone filed a complaint against the president in South Africa on the basis that he didn't report. Let's not go in South African politics. But someone had to file a report. The EFF people, they do it every day. They file reports. But in this case, in our country, there are people who benefit from always seen to be victims because there are voters who vote for victims. And so some of these political parties, they are happier being victims because there's a constituency. I'm sure because people have not been properly educated on what a vote is. They think that if someone is persecuted, then they are a good candidate. But that is not the way an electoral process must be conducted.
Let's turn to the economy. Pollard was also supposed to deal with those aspects of the economy and make sure that things get better for our people. Is there any movement in that area?
We have tried to give ideas, and I think some ideas have been taken, but unfortunately, the responsibility for the economy still lies with the government ultimately. We've had more than 2 summits where we've made our positions clear. Recently, it was on this currency framework, but we still find that we are not, as we are saying in government, I think the government is finding it very difficult, in fact, failing to put the economic situation in order. That is one area where I would say quite clearly that ZANU-PF has failed to run the country. For me, Zimbabweans must not vote for ZANU-PF in the next election. Certainly not. If they decide to vote for them, well, that's the problem for them. But ZANU-PF must be judged on the basis of the economy and on the basis of economic performance. They have failed. I was reading the press. I found that many of the companies that just suddenly woke up to say that they will only demand forex for certain products. If you actually go behind those companies, they are ZANU-PF connected. I mean, what is the explanation for Dairy Board wanting the products here and so on? If you go into who is running Dairy Board, what are the connections and so forth, you'll get some ZANU-PF connections. Even when you get big companies that may not necessarily be companies here, Swabs and others, many of those guys, they are people, the ones that are running, the chairperson of the board and things like that. They have very close connections with ZANU-PF or its ZANU-PF thing. ZANU-PF has failed the economic test or the economy test, and I would suggest that Zimbabweans must determine the fate of ZANU-PF on the basis of its inability to run the economy. Not all the paraphernalia that we spend discussing in the first, you want things like that, what the constitution, the appointments of the Mohadis, I mean, that's not an issue. If Zimbabweans want to move, and they have 2023, which is just about the election, is about 10, 11 months away, we unite around the fact that ZANU-PF has failed to run the economy. They also know that they've failed, because they come policy after policy. I mean, if you can't rein in companies that just come out openly defying the law, and all your response is to tell us that it is unlawful, because that's what you read in today's media. That's a completely failed response to an economy. So they have failed in that regard. We have given them the ideas that we are indicating. I don't even know whether our ideas would have worked, because that's an economic thing. Those were ideas. But the ultimate responsibility lies with government. Government must have the magic formula to run an economy. And if somewhat magical you can't work, you just tell everyone that it has failed. Then someone else must try to run the economy. That's what happens every day. And this is where our weakness is. I believe that we should change the terrain of the debate in the country. I know that, as I've told you at the beginning, under the current electoral political framework, it is possible to get an election that removes ZANU from power. Even with the number of registered voters we have now, the voters' roll is close to 6 million. It's about 5.8 by the last count. You mean 5.8 million people on the voters' roll would not be able to know that the economy is not functioning? ZANU-PF has been in government for 42 years, that it cannot work. I think that they should be able to. So all this diverting attention. The diaspora people, the constitution says they can't vote. That's what the constitutional court said. Let's park that for now. Yes, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission would have preferred it to be more independent than what it is. But let's park that. What is required is a Zimbabwean who knows where. Just vote against ZANU-PF when we get to 2023. ZANU-PF itself would be surprised to win. They have been in government for 42 years. And so on. The president himself has been in government all that time, since 1980. He has been in government in one post or the other. He is next year turning 81 and so forth. And that if he wins the election, people would want him to get all the way to 85 in government. I think that if he were to lose the election, he would easily accept on the basis that someone else must take over the country and so forth. So look, if we go into serious discussion, that is the discussion. My only problem with the questioning here is to want people to accept that they must support certain political parties. I lead a party called the NCA, never support ZANU-PF, never support CCC, never support the MDC, never at all support any of those other political parties. I want my party to get a more serious opportunity. So when it comes to who to vote for, that is where the difference comes in. But the narrative coming from most of the shows that I've seen you doing and your questions is, do not approach this country from a CCC perspective or from an MDC perspective. I want to keep repeating that point. That is the weakness of the media, the weakness of these people. If the CCC shouts that there is violence, then there is violence. They shout elections won't be free and fair next year. You say the election, you don't analyze issues. You focus on the basis of those gentlemen and ladies in the CCC will keep misleading the people of this country.
But we are giving you an opportunity to correct that. So
that's what I'm doing. I accept that point, but I have to.
But you continue going back to the CCC instead of telling us the position.
They are competitors, so we must, criticize them. I mean, they are our competitors. I mean, for the NCA to grow, the CCC must go down. So it's deliberate that we do that. I mean, I can't say they are a good party. They are not a good party, etc. The NCA position is clear. You've seen we are in Poland. We've told you why we are there. We want to improve the situation. The NCA position on the politics is to say that, look, we need to change this constitution. That's why we are a party on its own. Just change it. I've told you that the NCA position is that we would want an opportunity ourselves to run the economy. ZANU-PF has failed. People must not vote for ZANU-PF. That's what I've said. That's the NCA position. What else you want? When you get another opportunity, I hope you create it. I will come here and tell you what our economic blueprint is, and so on, which is not what the discussion initially was. Create that platform, I'll tell you. But I know that the biggest problems in the country is this polarization, and say that it's either you are ZANU or you are CCC.
How do we deal with that aspect of the problem in the country? Either you are ZANU
is to vote for us, vote for parties that are neither ZANU nor CCC. That's the solution. How do you deal with what? Vote for others. That's the solution. In fact, the solution has always been clear. The solution has always been to run away from these people. That's why you have this debate going around that ZANU-PF is there. Then there is, if Chamisa decides today to change his party to another name, he moved from MDC and called it CCC. Then if he decides that he is now DDD, then you and others will cease talking about CCC, you now talk about DDD. And what kind of a country can that be? So we are gradually moving to a situation
whose fault is that really? That people will gravitate towards whatever Chamisa does and not what Madhuku does or what Monzora does. Whose fault is that?
No, I have not said people gravitate towards what Chamisa does or what Monzora. I'm saying the media people. No, there are so many people who support us. Wait for 2023. Never say that this country is polarized. You ask the question whether in fact, how do we solve it? And I said the solution is to vote for parties other than these two. And in 2023, you will see a huge vote, which will neither be for ZANU nor for the CCC. You will see that huge vote.
Are you saying you're going to be upstaging these two political parties?
That's what we were working towards.
To win?
Yes.
Douglas Monzora once said you'd win by 66%. But you are actually saying you would actually be beating all of them.
That's why we're in politics. That's why we are a party separate from ZANU-PF.
Some people have blamed you really for joining Pollard, and they paint you with the same brush as ZANU-PF. They say you have sold out to ZANU-PF. How are you dealing with that?
I'm not dealing with that at all. I mean, they are entitled to that characterization. That is how they see it.
But these are the people who vote, aren't they?
Yeah, some of them are the ones who say that. Obviously, I cannot convince every Zimbabwean. I hope to have convinced sufficient Zimbabweans to win by 2023 election date. But what I'm telling you, which is an important answer to you, is that I will not waste time going to people and say, I haven't sold out to ZANU. What for? Because that's what they think. Because I know that there are people who know that I have not sold out to ZANU. So I work with those who know who I am and what I stand for. And I'm trying to grow that number. And it might take us a long time to do it. It doesn't matter that we don't succeed now, we don't succeed next year, or we don't succeed the year after. I have every hope that we will eventually succeed.
How long is your hope?
Okay, that's fine. I mean, how long is my hope? My hope is as long as hope, because that's what it would be. You see, hope is by definition hope. So I am working hard to realize my hopes. That's what I can do. And like everyone else is. I think on that question, you know, I started these processes of being against ZANU and so on. 97, when we formed the NCA. 99, we formed the MDC when the founding thing. I mean, everyone knows that. Then we've worked. What I know that we have not been able to form a government on our own since 97, since 99. So this question of asking me hope and how long would not just be peculiar to Madhuku. I think it will apply to everyone who has been around since 1980, everyone who has tried to replace ZANU-PF. Because before we entered the stage ourselves in 97 and 99, there were others who were trying to take ZANU out. So your question will apply to every opposition, at least in this country. But go to Zambia now, there were people that were trying. I know that President Ichilema is said to have tried, I think 5 or 6 times before he eventually won an election, and so on. We are waiting for the election in Kenya. I'm not sure how long Odinga then has tried, and he is trying again, and so forth. So this is politics. What the electorate must look out for is the extent of the conviction by the politicians. Yeah.
As we, I just wanted to look at the term limits that the Constitution provides. How good is this in terms of renewing a nation for Zimbabwe? Because we know that this would be President Emerson Mnangagwa's last term if he does win in 2023.
Yes, I mean, I think the Constitution says that it's 2 terms. Of course, this Constitution allows amendments to take place. The Constitution can always be amended in whatever way if the public is not alert. You know, we have this Constitution which received a 93% yes vote. But we know it's a very bad Constitution, at least from my perspective, and I think most people now know that. So if you were to want somewhat with some form of madness to say you want to amend the term limit provision and do everything that the Constitution wants for that term limit provision not to affect President Mnangagwa, if the public is not alert, that can happen. Now, the strength of that not happening should lie in the people, which is why at the start I am emphasizing that people must be, they must not be brainwashed by politicians. So obviously, it won't happen, that thing he would succeed. That will be of our dead bodies. Now this one, there's no reason, even without a constitutional provision. Even without a constitutional provision, the president must serve for not more than 10 years in any country. So we don't need the term provisions, we don't need the constitutional stipulation for us to say that if President Mnangagwa is re-elected in 2023, then surely he cannot hope to go beyond 2028, so that his statement that Nendi Chipo in 2030 obviously can't happen. I think that, I mean, you saw what happened in Sri Lanka, where that's what was happening there. People were able to go out there, invade the presidential residence or presidential palace or state house, and they were able to achieve what Zimbabweans have not been able to achieve. But obviously with that one, I don't think he has that in mind at all. It would be unfair for people to think that he has. In my interactions with him in Poland, he has sounded that he wants to follow the constitution as far as possible.
Yeah, but what advantages, does it have any advantages for the nation?
To do what?
To have these term limits.
Yeah, it's important. Leaders must keep being renewed, and that you have to have a constitutional renewal process, so the term limits must remain there.
You spoke about President Emmerson Mnangagwa's age, and you gave the figures. Do you think this matter as we go into this election, his age?
Well, I think that it is one of the factors that you're taking into account, and that his party must also take that into account. In an ideal world, I think that at 80, people must somewhat retire from public life. That's my view. And that I think that would be much better, because when you are over 80, you are still energetic, but you work at a slower rate, much slower rate than those who are younger. And that we are seeing that the Americans, I think they're having similar problems with President Biden there. But these are the kind of situations which ought to have been accommodated in the Constitution. So if you don't have a constitutional provision which says that we kept age of active life, then there's a problem. So I'll start by blaming the Constitution for not putting an age limit. In fact, the more we go with your interview, the more you will agree with my perennial criticism of the Constitution. Now, without a constitutional provision, you rely on the president getting off. But look, if you are there, you are at a slower pace. That's what we know. And then you are more vulnerable to advisors. You rely more on what these advisors come in. So you get people who, today you get this advice, tomorrow that advice, and so on. You normally would no longer be in a position to be so alert and so active that you devise your own proposals. That will be a weakness. So it must be taken into account. In fact, in an election, these things are not a secret. And they ought to be out there, and you vote on the basis of the totality of the information that is available.
Any other electoral issues? You spoke about the economy, also the age. Any other issues that you think would be really at the center of this election as we go to 2023, instead of this polarization? What are the real issues?
There's only one issue. It is the economy. That should be the only one issue. I think that 2023 must be, in my view, and also for the NCA, it must be a one-issue election. It must center on the economy. Who is better able to run the economy? Or secondly, under what political arrangements are we likely to get a better management of the economy? And there I think that that question can also be answered by ensuring that voters go out there to destroy the polarization. So they vote for, as far as I'm concerned, other players. Because with the polarization, you never focus on the issue. You focus on the political players. So ZANU-PF this other party that, and so on. So even people who are supposed to think outside the box will always be thinking, and so on. So polarization is a very serious cancer that will take away very well-intentioned people from focus on the issue. They don't want to be seen this or that. And I think that's what will have happened, etc. You also have like now businesses that then decide that they will use the economy either to make a political message and so on. So it must be a one-issue election. I think, Blessed and your colleagues, I would urge you to think seriously about a one-issue election. Zimbabwe has gone through a lot of suffering. Zimbabweans have gone through a lot of suffering. So whenever we get to an election, other issues are raised. The independence struggle, what we, etc. This and that. Please, let's have Zimbabweans who are able to run the economy. And I will not begrudge anyone who wins an election on that ticket, and we are able to put them on the spot and say, look, you want to make our lives better, to make the economy better. Where are you? If that doesn't happen, you get out. That's when many developed countries have run on that basis.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to hear your thinking around the gold coins as an economic measure. What is your thinking around?
Oh, well, I have very clear thoughts. I don't think it's a worthwhile solution that has been. Many of us would not understand it. I'm still looking for advice myself to understand what the logic of it is. But if a person at my level still has to find out what it is, and that kind of a complex way of running, that artificial way of running an economy, why should Zimbabwe always be in its own peculiar basket when it comes to economic solutions? That is a problem. So the gold coins are evidence of failure on the part of the government. They're not different from, bearer checks, this thing about that. We always have had economic solutions that are peculiar to Zimbabwe. And we've had that for too long. That's what I'm saying. And I think that we should get out of. You cannot get out of that unless you have ZANU-PF out of government.
Now, as we close, I'll just give you an opportunity to send your own message, direct message to the people of Zimbabwe, what they should expect from you, what you as the leader of the NCA and the NCA can bring to the table for the people of Zimbabwe as we go into 2023.
Thank you very much for that invitation. I would want to appeal to Zimbabweans to regard this country as their own, and they must not apportion this country to political parties. So they must desist, and we must desist and work hard from being appendages of political parties, and look out to parties like the NCA as parties that are bringing sanity into the political field. They are away from ZANU-PF, away from the bigger political parties. We promise that we will provide an effective economic management model for the country.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the opportunity that you have had with us and to explain your policies, and also to talk about the achievements of Pollard and your views ahead of the 2023 general elections. Now, Professor Madhuku said 2023 is about the economy and nothing else. That is what really sticks out for him as we go to elections, and his political party and himself are going to be there trying to pull Zimbabweans out of this economic quagmire. Now, this is the Free Talk with me, your host as usual, Blessed Mhlanga Dara, on this, the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. Until next time, thank you for choosing us as your station of choice.